In the late 15th century, Europe was filled with an intense curiosity about the world beyond its borders. Trade with Asia was critical, but the land routes to the east were controlled by other powers, making them long, dangerous, and expensive. Amidst this backdrop, Christopher Columbus, an Italian navigator, began to believe that the world was smaller than it really was. He proposed an ambitious idea. By sailing westward from Europe, he could reach Asia more directly. Columbus was convinced that the West held the key to a new route to the East, but what he didn't realize was that a whole new continent lay in between. His journey would forever change the course of history. In 1492, Columbus secured support from the Spanish monarchy, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, who were eager to find new trade routes and expand their influence. They agreed to finance his expedition, and Columbus set sail with 3 ships, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina. These ships, marked with the Red Cross of St. George, were not only symbols of Spain's hopes, but also instruments for what would be one of the most monumental voyages in history. The journey across the Atlantic Ocean was long and perilous, and Columbus and his crew had no idea what lay ahead. The ocean was vast, and many sailors feared the unknown. But despite the growing doubts and fears of the crew, Columbus remained resolute in his belief that Asia was just around the corner. On October 12, 1492, after months of sailing west, land was finally sighted. Columbus and his crew had reached what he thought was Asia, but in reality, they had arrived at the shores of a completely new world, the Caribbean islands. Columbus named the island San Salvador, but believed he had reached the outskirts of Asia, unaware that he had just made the first European contact with the Americas. This moment, though misunderstood by Columbus himself, was a turning point in world history, opening the door for further exploration and eventual colonization of the New World by European powers. The ships Columbus sailed on were modest by today's standards. The Santa Maria was the largest, serving as Columbus's flagship, while the Pinta and the Nina were smaller but nimbler vessels. These ships, with their white sails marked by a red cross, were perfect for navigating the unpredictable Atlantic, though the journey was far from easy. Columbus and his crew faced many challenges: storms, difficult navigation, and the harsh conditions of the open sea. The journey was exhausting and uncertain, and at times, the crew feared they would never find land. But Columbus remained determined, driven by the belief that he was on a path to greatness. When they finally spotted land, the joy and relief must have been overwhelming, though Columbus would soon realize that he was far from Asia. Columbus's arrival in the Americas set in motion a series of events that would change the world forever. Despite his mistake in thinking he had reached Asia, Columbus's discovery opened up the Americas to European exploration. Over the next few years, Columbus made several more voyages, exploring different parts of the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. However, he never fully understood the magnitude of his discovery. He continued to believe that he was near Asia, never realizing that he had found an entirely new continent. The impact of his voyages, however, would be far-reaching. The Americas, previously unknown to Europeans, became the center of global attention. For Europe, Columbus's discovery meant new opportunities. The Americas offered fresh lands for exploration, new resources, and trade routes that could enrich the old continent. This sparked the beginning of the age of exploration, as European powers began to send more explorers across the ocean, seeking to expand their empires, trade networks, and influence. For the native peoples of the Americas, however, Columbus's arrival marked the beginning of a painful era. The encounter between Europeans and indigenous populations brought with it disease, violence, and the displacement of entire civilizations. The arrival of Europeans forever changed the lives of the native peoples, many of whom were devastated by the introduction of foreign diseases and the subsequent colonization. In the centuries following Columbus's voyages, the impact on both Europe and the Americas would be profound. For Europeans, the Americas represented new possibilities, new lands to conquer, new resources to exploit, and new trade networks to build. Colonization began, and over time, European nations established empires across the American continents. For the native peoples, however, the arrival of Europeans resulted in great suffering. Diseases like smallpox wiped out vast portions of the indigenous population, and the land that had been theirs for centuries was claimed by foreign powers. The legacy of Columbus is complex, and it is still a topic of debate today. On the one hand, Columbus's journey opened up the Americas to European exploration, leading to the establishment of the modern world. On the other hand, his voyages also marked the beginning of colonization, which led to the destruction of countless native cultures and societies. Columbus's story is one of discovery, but also of tragedy. While he is often celebrated for his boldness and vision, it is important to remember the consequences of his actions for the native peoples of the Americas. Columbus did not understand the true significance of his discovery, but what he set in motion. European exploration, colonization, and the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures would change the world forever. His journey serves as a reminder that history is shaped by both triumphs and tragedies, and the world we live in today is the result of events that began over 500 years ago.